Of Jeffrey Epstein calling for truthful testimony. The chants are directed at former Attorney General Pam Bondi, and she's testifying behind closed doors at this hour before the House Oversight Committee. The focus is on the DOJ's compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns, who's following this for us today. Caitlin, good to see you. What is the committee looking for in today's deposition?
Hey, Mugo. Well, this is a long time coming. This committee has long wanted to hear from Pam Bondi. And actually, while she was Attorney General, they subpoenaed her to come before this committee. As you know, the president then fired her, and she said she would not appear before the committee, then later backtracked and said she would, in fact, testify. But
all right, people, welcome back to Dr. John Podcast. Attorney General Pam Bondi fell apart in a congressional hearing under pointed questions about Epstein files, late-night calls with Trump, and missing DOJ documents. The stunning collapse happened in real time on camera, leaving observers asking what exactly she's hiding. She couldn't answer direct questions. She got defensive almost immediately. She started dodging and weaving in ways that made it painfully obvious she was hiding something significant. She stammered. She deflected. She looked like someone who had walked into a trap she never saw coming. And the members of Congress on that committee noticed every single tell, every nervous gesture, every evasive answer that screamed guilt louder than any confession could have. They could see her panicking when confronted with specific evidence. They could see her discomfort when the questions zeroed in on her own conduct. They could see that she had no good answers to offer, only weak excuses that crumbled under the slightest pressure.
Former Attorney General Pam Bondi is on Capitol Hill testifying behind closed doors before the House Oversight Committee about her handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. In her prepared statement, Bondi maintained that under her leadership, the Justice Department demonstrated an unprecedented commitment to transparency, while acknowledging that there were, quote, redaction errors in the released files. Epstein survivors slammed Bondi's handling of the files and what they call the DOJ's continued cover-up of the convicted sex offender's criminal network.
Under her watch, millions of pages of Epstein documents were released in ways that protected the powerful while exposing survivors.
We have leads. We have names. We are all reading the same file. Are we not?
The committee will release a transcript of Bondi's interview at a later date, but not a video recording. President Trump removed Bondi as Attorney General last month. She announced earlier this week she has been diagnosed and undergone treatment for thyroid cancer.
The questions themselves were straightforward, the kind of basic inquiries that any attorney general should be able to answer without breaking a sweat. Did you have late-night phone conversations with the president about ongoing investigations at the Department of Justice? Bondi wouldn't give a clear answer. Why are Epstein-related files that Congress specifically ordered released still being withheld from public view? Bondi became evasive and refused to explain. Did you remove documents from DOJ systems without proper authorization? Bondi started stammering and couldn't produce a coherent explanation. Why did the Department of Justice take down publicly available studies about far-right violence that were already in the public domain? Bondi had no reasonable justification whatsoever. Every single question made her look worse. Every attempted answer sounded like she was hiding something far more serious than a simple policy disagreement. She was sweating under the lights. She was visibly nervous and uncomfortable. She was clearly panicking as the evidence piled up against her in real time. And then things went from bad to catastrophic for Pam Bondi.
Because during a lengthy House Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday, Attorney General Pam Bondi clashed with lawmakers over the DOJ's release of documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein. Throughout 5 hours of questioning, Bondi offered little new information on the files, but there was a lot of shouting, throwing insults, and deflecting questions.
None of them asked Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein. How ironic is that? You know why? Because Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch.
Reclaim?
Not on our time. No way.
Reclaim?
And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me
Yeah, oh, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order.
While Congress was tearing apart her testimony, a federal judge named Tanya Chutkan was issuing a ruling that would fundamentally change everything. This wasn't some random jurist making wild accusations from the bench. Judge Chutkan is a serious federal judge with a reputation for handling major cases with care and deliberation. She doesn't make inflammatory statements without basis. She doesn't engage in political grandstanding. She issues rulings based on evidence and law, period. And when Judge Chutkan looked at what Bondi had done, at the pattern of conduct that emerged from the documents and testimony, she reached a conclusion that should terrify anyone who believes in equal justice under law. Judge Chutkan basically said Bondi's conduct rises to the level of criminal behavior.
Like a prize fighter entering the ring.
Your message to the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein.
Attorney General Pam Bondi ready to go multiple rounds with the House Judiciary Committee.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I
anything,
did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
At times, it seemed more like a bad reality TV show than a congressional hearing.
I am reclaiming my time, and when I reclaim my time, it is
Mr. Chairman, the gentlelady has
I'm
reclaimed her
not going
time.
to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
But there were serious questions about the DOJ's handling of the Epstein files.
to the survivors in the room. If you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice.
Let that sink in for a moment. A federal judge, someone who has spent years on the bench evaluating evidence and applying the law, looked at the Attorney General's actions and concluded she had committed crimes. Judge Chutkan said Bondi obstructed justice. Judge Chutkan said Bondi committed perjury when testifying under oath. Judge Chutkan said Bondi tampered with evidence. These aren't casual observations or political opinions. These are formal judicial findings based on actual evidence and established legal standards. And then Judge Chutkan said something even more damning. She said the path to federal prison is clear. Not that Bondi might go to prison someday if things go badly. Not that prison is theoretically possible as a consequence. The judge said the path is clear, meaning prison is practically inevitable. The judge said the evidence is so strong, the conduct so egregious, that conviction is essentially guaranteed if this goes to trial. Think about the significance of that statement. The top law enforcement officer in the entire country, the person who runs the Department of Justice, the person who is supposed to enforce the law and uphold the Constitution, and a federal judge is saying that person belongs in prison. That's not a small thing. That's not a disagreement about policy or interpretation. That's a judge looking at actual evidence and saying criminal prosecution is absolutely warranted. The irony is almost too perfect to believe. Bondi's own testimony, her own documents, her own words are being used directly against her. When she tried to explain her conduct, her explanations made no sense. When she tried to defend her decisions, the decisions looked indefensible. When she tried to argue, she did nothing wrong. The actual evidence suggested she did many things wrong. She ended up proving the case against herself through her own defensive responses and contradictory statements. Her testimony is now evidence of her guilt. Her own words are the most damaging thing prosecutors could possibly have. The members of Congress questioning her were absolutely brutal. They didn't hold back. They suggested directly that Bondi had lied in previous testimony under oath. They raised the prospect of criminal referrals for perjury and obstruction. They accused her of defying congressional mandates about releasing Epstein files to the public. They basically told her face-to-face that she's facing potential criminal charges. And Bondi just sat there in front of everyone with no good answers, no effective defense, just a guilty and afraid expression that spoke volumes. One witness described her as visibly shocked throughout the entire questioning, like someone who walked into a trap and only realized it when the jaws snapped shut. She wasn't expecting the level of detail Congress had access to. She wasn't expecting members to be so specific about what she had done wrong. She thought she could just give vague answers and move on to the next question. But Congress had the receipts. Congress had the documents. Congress had the actual evidence. And when Congress showed Bondi the evidence right there in the hearing room, she fell apart completely. This is a complete nightmare scenario for her personally. She went from being Attorney General to potentially facing federal prison time. She went from running the Justice Department to being investigated by the Justice Department itself. She went from prosecuting other people to potentially being prosecuted herself. This is someone's career and personal freedom being threatened in real time, on camera, for the entire world to witness. The thing that a lot of people don't fully grasp is just how serious this situation actually is and what it means going forward. They think it's just some oversight hearing where Bondi got a little nervous and uncomfortable. They think it's just political theater, the kind of partisan squabbling that happens in Washington all the time, but it's way deeper than that. Way deeper. This is about an attorney general potentially committing serious crimes to protect the president. This is about document tampering and evidence destruction. This is about lying under oath. This is about things that can actually send people to federal prison for years. This isn't a game. This isn't politics as usual. This is the kind of conduct that destroys careers and ends freedom. First thing you need to understand is that Pam Bondi's job as attorney general is to enforce the law and uphold the Constitution. She's not supposed to be Trump's personal lawyer or fixer. She's not supposed to do whatever Trump wants her to do. She's supposed to be independent. She's supposed to make decisions based on the law and the actual facts, not based on what Trump personally wants. But from everything Congress was investigating, it looks like Bondi was doing whatever Trump wanted instead of what the law actually required. She was treating the Department of Justice as a political tool rather than an independent law enforcement agency. And that's a fundamental violation of everything the office stands for. The Epstein file situation is a perfect example of this pattern. Congress passed a specific law that said Epstein-related documents have to be released to the public. Congress said the American people have a constitutional right to see these files. Congress said there should be minimal redactions only to protect victims from harm. But then Bondi's DOJ refused to fully comply with Congress's direct order. Her department kept withholding documents from public view. Her department was not transparent. And when Congress asked why the files weren't released, Bondi couldn't explain it. She got defensive about it. She looked like she was deliberately covering something up. And there's a very good reason why she might have been covering things up intentionally. If Trump appears in Epstein files, if Trump is connected to Epstein in ways documented in official records, that would be devastating for Trump politically. If there are documents that connect Trump to Epstein somehow, that would be damaging beyond belief. So maybe Bondi was protecting Trump by not releasing the files publicly. Maybe she was deliberately violating federal law to protect Trump from political damage. That would explain why she got so defensive and evasive when Congress asked direct questions about the Epstein files. That would explain why she looked so guilty and afraid. The late-night phone calls with Trump are another clear example of potential misconduct. Congress asked Bondi about calls she had with Trump related to ongoing investigations. If an attorney general is getting late-night calls from the sitting president about investigations, that's a serious problem. That could be improper pressure being applied. That could be an attempt to influence an investigation politically. And Bondi wouldn't explain these calls. She refused to give details. She just clammed up completely. Which makes you wonder what exactly was being discussed on these late-night calls. What was so sensitive that she couldn't even acknowledge the basic nature of the conversations? Then there's the document removal situation. That's also extremely serious. Bondi's DOJ removed documents from public systems without authorization. Congress didn't order that removal. The law didn't require that removal. Bondi's DOJ just decided on its own to remove them. And when asked why these documents were removed, Bondi couldn't give a straight answer about it. A federal judge looked at this conduct and concluded it was evidence tampering. That's not just a policy disagreement or a miscommunication. That's a crime. That's criminal conduct that can send someone to federal prison. The far-right violence studies that got removed from public view are another example of Bondi potentially using the DOJ in ways that look political rather than legal. Far-right violence is a real documented problem that the DOJ was studying. Congress and the general public had access to these studies, but then Bondi's DOJ removed them from public view. Why exactly? Was it because the studies made Trump's base look bad? Was it because Trump didn't want people seeing this information? Nobody knows, because Bondi wouldn't explain her decision. She just sat there looking guilty and uncomfortable while members of Congress demanded answers she refused to provide. Judge Tanya Chutkan is a serious federal judge with a real reputation. She's not a political judge making wild accusations. She's not someone who makes decisions lightly. When Judge Chutkan said Bondi committed obstruction of justice, that means Bondi did something to interfere with legal proceedings. When Judge Chutkan said Bondi committed perjury, that means Bondi lied while under oath. When Judge Chutkan said Bondi tampered with evidence, that means Bondi destroyed or altered evidence deliberately. These are serious accusations. These are criminal accusations under federal law. And Judge Chutkan didn't just make accusations without basis. She issued a formal ruling based on actual evidence and findings of fact. She looked at the documents and reviewed the testimony and concluded that Bondi broke the law. That's different from someone just saying Bondi did something wrong. That's a federal judge making an official finding that crimes were committed. That carries enormous legal weight. The phrase, "the path to prison is clear," is really significant language. That's not casual language. That's not something a judge says lightly. That's a judge basically saying, if this case goes to trial, Bondi will probably be convicted. That's a judge saying Bondi will probably go to prison. That's a judge saying the evidence is overwhelming. That's a judge saying the crimes are serious. That's a judge saying Bondi's legal exposure is dire. This is the kind of language judges use when they've seen enough evidence to know what the outcome will be. This is the kind of language that should terrify anyone facing criminal charges. Congressional members were also pointing out inconsistencies in Bondi's testimony under oath. Members said Bondi lied in previous testimony to Congress. Members said Bondi was now contradicting what she said before in earlier testimony. Members were laying out a detailed pattern of dishonesty. Members were suggesting that Bondi wasn't just making innocent mistakes. Members were suggesting that Bondi was deliberately deceiving Congress under oath, and that's the thing that could turn this into a serious criminal case against her. If Bondi deliberately lied to Congress under oath, that's perjury. If Bondi deliberately destroyed evidence, that's obstruction of justice. If Bondi deliberately withheld documents that Congress ordered released, that's contempt of Congress. These are serious crimes that can send people to federal prison for years. Bipartisan calls for investigation are also significant. This isn't just Democrats going after Bondi politically. Republicans are also concerned about what Bondi did. Republicans are also calling for investigations. That suggests this isn't a partisan witch hunt. This is a real concern about serious misconduct. This is genuine concern across party lines. When both parties agree that something needs to be investigated, that's when you know things are really serious. Prosecutors are probably looking at who helped Bondi hide evidence and cover things up. If there's a conspiracy to cover things up, then other people in Trump's administration could be implicated. Other people in the DOJ could face charges. This could expand into a much broader investigation of Trump's administration and who was involved in these activities. Let's think about what this actually means for Bondi and for Trump's administration going forward. The most important thing to understand is that an attorney general's job is to enforce the law, not to protect the president personally. Bondi's job was to make sure the DOJ was independent. Bondi's job was to make sure the DOJ wasn't being used for political purposes. But instead, Bondi appears to have used the DOJ to protect Trump. She withheld Epstein files, probably to protect Trump from embarrassment. She took late-night calls from Trump about investigations, probably to take direction from Trump. She removed documents, probably to hide things that would make Trump look bad. This is not what an attorney general is supposed to do. This goes against everything the job is supposed to represent. The actual evidence suggests Bondi saw the DOJ as a tool to protect Trump, rather than as an independent law enforcement agency. Congress passed a law requiring Epstein files be released to the public. Bondi ignored that law. Congress asked about late-night calls with Trump about investigations. Bondi got defensive about those calls. Congress wanted to know why documents were removed from public view. Bondi couldn't explain it at all. This pattern suggests Bondi prioritized Trump's interests over following the law. She put loyalty above duty. She put political protection above legal obligation. And now she's facing the consequences of those choices. According to Judge Chutkan's ruling, Bondi committed obstruction of justice. Bondi committed perjury. Bondi committed evidence tampering. These are serious crimes. These are not just ethical violations or mistakes. These are actual federal crimes that can send people to prison for years. Bondi is facing potential criminal prosecution. Bondi's law license could be revoked. Bondi's career as an attorney could be completely over. The obstruction of justice charge means Bondi did something to interfere with legal proceedings. The perjury charge means Bondi lied while under oath to Congress. The evidence tampering charge means Bondi destroyed or altered evidence deliberately. These are all serious federal crimes that carry substantial prison sentences. And a federal judge has said there's enough evidence that Bondi committed these crimes that prison is a likely outcome if this goes to trial. The really damaging thing is that Bondi's own words are being used directly against her in this situation. When Congress asked Bondi questions, her answers didn't make sense. When Bondi tried to explain her decisions, the explanations looked like lies. When Bondi tried to defend her conduct, her own defense proved she did something wrong. So Bondi ended up proving the case against herself. Bondi's testimony is now evidence that she broke the law. This is why the judge said the path to prison is clear. Because when you have the subject's own testimony and documents, you have strong evidence. You don't need as many witnesses. You don't need complex circumstantial evidence. You have the person's own words saying they did things wrong. That's powerful evidence in any federal court. If Bondi committed crimes to protect Trump, then other people in Trump's administration might have done the same thing. Other people might have helped Bondi cover things up. Other people might have been involved in hiding documents. Other people might have been involved in obstructing justice. Prosecutors are probably looking at these questions right now. Prosecutors might be investigating who else was involved. This could expand beyond just Bondi. This could implicate other officials in Trump's administration. This could become a much broader investigation of corruption and obstruction at the highest levels of government. Why is this so significant for Trump's administration? Because it shows that even Trump's closest loyalists are not above the law. Bondi was Trump's attorney general. Bondi was loyal to Trump. But now Bondi is facing criminal charges potentially. This sends a message to other Trump officials that loyalty won't protect you if you break the law. This sends a message that courts and Congress will hold Trump officials accountable. For Trump personally, Bondi's situation is dangerous. If Bondi faces prosecution, she might cooperate with prosecutors to reduce her sentence. She might provide testimony about what Trump directed her to do. She might explain why she took certain actions. She might reveal conversations with Trump about investigations. That would be devastating for Trump politically and legally. The Epstein file situation is also incredibly significant. If Bondi was hiding Epstein files to protect Trump, that raises questions about what's in those files. That raises questions about Trump's connections to Epstein. That raises questions about what Trump wanted hidden. Congress is not going to let this go. Congress is going to keep investigating. Congress is going to keep demanding answers about those files. The American people deserve to know what's in those files. The American people deserve transparency from their government. And if Bondi was hiding information to protect Trump, that's a betrayal of the public trust that demands accountability. What happens next to Pam Bondi specifically? Prosecutors are probably going to build a criminal case against her. Prosecutors have Judge Chutkan's findings. Prosecutors have Congress's investigation. Prosecutors have Bondi's own testimony. Prosecutors have plenty of evidence. Bondi is probably going to face indictment for obstruction of justice, perjury, and evidence tampering. Bondi will probably hire a criminal defense lawyer. Bondi will probably face trial in federal court. And based on the evidence, Bondi will probably be convicted. If Bondi is convicted, she will probably go to federal prison. Prison sentences for obstruction and perjury can be several years long. Bondi could easily face 5 to 10 years in prison. Bondi's law license will probably be revoked permanently. Bondi's career is probably over. Bondi's reputation is definitely damaged beyond repair. But the bigger question is whether this implicates Trump personally. Did Trump direct Bondi to hide the Epstein files? Did Trump tell Bondi to obstruct justice? Did Trump tell Bondi to lie under oath? If Trump directed Bondi to do these things, then Trump could be liable as well. Trump could face obstruction charges. Trump could face conspiracy charges. Trump could face charges related to pressuring the Attorney General to break the law. The congressional investigation is going to keep digging deeper. Members from both parties want answers. Members want to know why Epstein files were withheld. Members want to know about the late-night calls with Trump. Members want to know who ordered documents removed. Members will probably subpoena Trump officials. Members might try to hold Bondi in contempt if she doesn't comply with their demands. This is the beginning of Bondi's fall from grace. This is not the end. This is the start of criminal investigations. This is the start of potential prosecutions. This is the start of Bondi's political and legal catastrophe. And this could expand to other Trump officials if they were involved in the same conduct. For Trump, Bondi's collapse is a major problem. Trump needed a loyal attorney general. Trump got Bondi, but now Bondi is facing criminal charges potentially. Now Bondi is a liability instead of an asset. Now Trump has to worry about Bondi cooperating with prosecutors. Now Trump has has to worry about what Bondi will say if she's facing prison time. This is what happens when you put loyalty above the law. This is what happens when you use the Justice Department for political purposes. This is what happens when you break the law to protect the president. Eventually, the law catches up with you. Eventually, judges hold you accountable. Eventually, prosecutors build a case against you, and then you end up facing prison time. Pretty wild how fast Trump's attorney general went from being loyal to potentially facing federal prison. But that's the reality of the situation. That's what the evidence shows. That's what the judge said. The path to prison is clear for Pam Bondi, and she walked that path herself, step by step, with every decision she made to protect Trump instead of upholding the law.